Now, it should be noted that cringe culture is dead, and I do not mourn it. In the past, people have been made fun of for simply being passionate about something they really enjoy. And when something becomes really popular, especially when the demographic is young women, people tend to give that thing a lot of really unneeded scrutiny, treating it horribly just because of who likes it. And I condemn that mindset wholeheartedly. I'm a huge believer in the whole just let people enjoy things kind of mindset because, you don't need to make fun of someone just for liking something. And we should really be refocusing our criticisms towards the actual media that we criticize, not towards people. And we need to re-examine our biases so that we aren't criticizing something just for the sake of criticizing it because we don't like the people who like it. Now with that being said, what's up? My name is TST Tom and welcome back to 2011, apparently. A lot of you are probably aware of the cultural phenomenon that was the Twilight Saga, whether because you actually experienced it or because of its reputation alone. It used to be a really big thing to just make fun of Twilight online, especially as the movies were coming out. Over the years though, this firestorm really died down quite a bit, as the people who were spending most of their energy making fun of Twilight shifted their attentions towards more deserving targets. The world moved on from the Stephenie Meyers and the Twilights of the world and shifted its attention towards the Blanca Lipnicka Ziz and the 365 Days of the World. I'm not going to talk about that book or that movie, so don't even try. Don't do it. You're not gonna get it. I'm not gonna subject myself to that. So, let it go. However, as you may or may not have noticed, over the last year we've been in the middle of a global pandemic. People everywhere are stressed, scared, and have been for over a year. So people have been falling back on their favorite activities from better times, including their fandoms. Harry Potter had a revival, that didn't end well, along with the Hunger Games, Five Nights at Freddy's, Supernatural, Undertale, and, as you may or may not have guessed, Twilight. Media criticism podcasts, YouTube retrospectives, YouTube reviews, all of that stuff has been really booming recently. And it got me thinking. I had never actually read Twilight, or seen any of the movies. I knew very, very little about the series, and all I did know I learned from pop culture osmosis. So I got curious. What was I missing out on here? Or, to be more accurate, what was I protecting myself from? All these questions plagued me, so I decided to do what any reasonable person would do. I decided to ascend to the top of the diving board, hold my nose, close my eyes, and cannonball straight into the Twilight Experience. Before I get started, I do want to give you a few fair warnings. First of all, if you're a fan of Twilight, or just the Twilight Saga in general, know that no matter how much I disparage its name in this video, I don't hate it, or the people who like it, in any way. I have friends who adore this series, and that's totally okay. We can all have different tastes. This is just my own opinion. I can definitely see some of the appeal, and I don't want to alienate anyone who enjoys it. However, I do hope that you can acknowledge that there are some flaws with this series and that I will be going deep into those flaws. At the very least, I hope you can have somewhat of a sense of humor about it. And again, if you don't, I have nothing against you. And I totally understand. Just, this video probably isn't for you. So now that's out of the way, I'd also like to give a small content warning. I do discuss emotionally abusive relationships within this video, so if that's going to affect you, please do feel free to take any measures you need to protect yourself or just not to watch the video. I don't know exactly when that'll be, so I'll try to see if I can put some timestamps in there in the description, but if there's not there, just know that I still try to help with that. I want to warn you, there are also mentions of sexual assault, so I will definitely put timestamps for that. And last but not least, there will be heavy spoilers for both the first book and the first movie of Twilight, if you can have a 16-year-old book spoiled for you. If you don't know the plot line of Twilight at all, just first off, where's the rock that you've been hiding under? Because I think I should really stay under there for a while. It would really help. Second of all, here's the basic plot lines in regard to both the book and the movies so that everyone's on board. 17-year-old Bella Swan moves from Phoenix, Arizona to Forks, Washington to live with her father Charlie, the town's police chief. Her mother has remarried, finding herself in Florida with a minor league baseball player named Phil. And as for why Bella doesn't just live with her mom, even though she hates Forks so much, despite inexplicably hating literally everything about Forks, life up there is actually pretty decent for Bella. She's ahead of all of her classmates academically. We'll get to that later. Her father's influence gives her a certain level of clout, and seemingly every single member of the student body is infatuated with her in some way. Whether it be the boys always constantly asking her out, but not the girls, of course, because that would be gay. Instead, all of the girls immediately shoot her up to the top of the food chain, and she becomes one of the popular girls because
she's just really cool, guys. She's really cool, and she's just so charismatic.
back. The only exception to this infatuation seems to be the Cullens, a group of unrealistically beautiful and majestic teenagers who all share the school with Bella. The one of most note here being Edward Cullen, a charming young man who spends the first few chapters either so disgusted with Bella that he almost throws up, or just glaring at her intently while they share a lab in science. Like I said, charming. Surprisingly, this doesn't deter Bella in the slightest, and she becomes hopelessly infatuated with Edward, which is not helped by him using his superhuman speed and strength to save her from a car wreck. Oh yeah, by the way, he has superhuman speed and strength. Bella keeps trying to spend more time with Edward in order to both get closer to him and also figure out who, or what, he is. Meanwhile, she meets Jacob Black, a 15-year-old Native American boy who tells her a story about his shape-shifting ancestors and their ancient rivalry with the Cullens. Jacob is a member of the Quileute tribe, a Native American tribe who exists in real life, and in the context of the story, created a peace treaty with the Cullens that doesn't allow them to step on their land. The mystery comes to a head when Bella is saved yet again by Edward, this time from being sexually assaulted in an alley. Afterwards, they get dinner, and Bella gets Edward to spill the beans. His great secret? He is a vampire. I'm sure no one saw that coming. For most of the rest of the story, there's this kind of will they won't they back and forth dynamic between Edward and Bella, where they move from being acquaintances to dating. With Bella meeting and learning more about the Cullens and Edward learning about the concept of healthy human relationships, it's a very fun time until the plot suddenly decides to jump in at the last few chapters, when a gang of vampires shows up and one of them decides to just hunt Bella for kicks. Edward tries to protect Bella by sending her away back to Phoenix, but she gets tricked into falling into a trap and ends up with a broken back. No, and ends up with a broken leg and a bitten hand for it. Edward is able to remove the vampire poison from her hand with extreme self-control before it's too late. And the book ends with a recovering Bella lamenting that Edward didn't let her be turned into a vampire so she could be with him forever. This boy that she knew for 3 weeks. I skipped through a lot of the little details, but that's the basic picture. Now, we move on to the juicy stuff. It should be known that I am a gamer. As such, the printed page is too much for my screen-frazzled brain to comprehend. So like any true gamer, I started with the movie. Well, that's actually not technically accurate. I actually started reading the book first, but then I watched the movie while I was reading the book, and so since I finished the movie first, I decided to write the script for it first, and so I'm lazy to move it around, so this is just what we're going with. As I prepared myself for this legendary experience, I began to ask myself, what would it be like experiencing this legendary piece of cinema, this crown jewel, this holy grail of all 2011 Tumblr blogs? Would I crumble in its glory? Would I see the light? Would Gabe Newell descend from the heavens and finally give us Half-Life 3? They're making Half-Life 4? Hype. Well, I will say I enjoyed myself, for better or for worse. Twilight the movie is a dream-like experience, though probably not in the way that the filmmakers intended. Some of my dreams give me material for some hilarious content, and this was more like one of those dreams. The movie really entertained me with how just kind of dumb everything was. Bella's dad, Edward, the Cullens, the school, the villains, the special effects, the story, it was all hilarious. Just for example, there was one scene where Edward and Bella were having a serious conversation in Edward's room, and when it was over, Edward just picked up Bella and then just leaped through the window. He didn't even leap, it was more like he just floated out the window. I don't know what it was, but this scene just caught me off guard and I laughed like a solid 10 seconds. This little discussion, of course, leads me to the best scene in the entire movie. Throughout most of the movie, I was either just kind of laughing or just kind of sitting there, mindlessly, taking it all in, wondering if life would ever be worth it. However, there was one exception to this rule, and if you've seen the movie, then you probably know what I'm talking about. The one exception, the one scene that was genuinely a lot of fun, unironically, was the baseball scene. This is it! This is everything I hoped for! This is everything I could have longed for! This is amazing! This is the perfect time for everything! This scene was genuinely a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed watching it. I think it was the only time that I really felt what the filmmakers intended for me as an audience member to feel. I can't even really describe the scene in any way that really do it justice, so if you haven't seen it, then you need to see it, just like watching on some film clips video or something. Unfortunately, I don't enjoy everything in this movie. In fact, there was a lot I didn't particularly enjoy. So let's get through all the things that are actually part of the movie itself and not just part of the story. I'll get to those when I talk about the story in the book section. To start off, I don't really know what was going on with the direction of this movie, because aside from the aforementioned baseball scene, it was mostly just kind of flat and generic and boring, really. I just didn't feel like the direction really added to the movie in any way. None of the actors seem to have any chemistry with each other, and it's especially obvious during the interactions between Kristen Stewart and Robert Pattinson, which is really a shame because they're both fantastic actors. At least, I think Kristen Stewart's a good actress. I haven't seen her in anything other than Zathura, and that's probably not an excellent show of her acting prowess. So that's something I can't really answer. Anna Kendrick was pretty good though. I liked her performance in this movie. Not much else to say besides that. I love you. I also really don't like how this movie looks. Everything is like so drab and disappointing. It all feels very ugh. I'm a Washingtonian myself, and I can personally attest that Washington is not this pale blue tint in real life. It's a pale gray tint, thank you very much. Though seeing what the footage looks like before the color tint, I can't say I blame them. Otherwise, it's a perfectly okay movie. Don't go into expecting a masterpiece, obviously, but you can still have a good hour and a half of turn off your brain type fun. 4 out of 10. Now, let's talk about the book. The thing that fascinates me the most about this whole experience is that I can understand where a good majority of the appeal came from at the time. Listen, I am by no means the target demographic for this book, but I can definitely understand how it would be appealing to have a significant other who was really attractive. One could say angelic, and that one is Stephenie Meyer, who works out a way to describe Edward as angelic at least 3 times every single chapter. And yet is still incredibly devoted to a character that the reader can identify with and who doesn't really need to put a lot of effort into the relationship. It's a self-insert fantasy like a lot of superhero stories, or supervillain stories if you can sort with a certain population of Reddit. However, the problem that arises with this self-insert fantasy type of storytelling is that the story in question doesn't really need to put in a lot of effort to actually make their relationships believable or healthy. And guess which story does exactly that? Bella and Edward have a rather nefarious dynamic in that Edward does seem to genuinely care for Bella, just not enough to treat her like a human being. He's constantly dismissive of her fears and feelings, is very controlling, and likes to sneak into her bedroom to watch her sleep, even before they were dating. Bella is not really helping either. She's so smitten with Edward that anything that he does that crosses the line she either outright ignores or just dismisses as endearing. So yeah, that's a great dynamic, though not very dissimilar to a lot of real high school relationships. Which is kind of my point. Presenting a toxic relationship in fiction inherently in and of itself isn't bad, as long as the story knows it. The story does nothing to question anything Bella does or gives the audience warning signs telling you that this is not okay, so it inadvertently promotes this kind of really toxic behavior. That's really irresponsible in my opinion, and honestly that's probably the worst thing that this book does, but I digress. Enough about Edward, let's talk about Bella, our protagonist. Prior to reading this book, the general impression I got from people was that Bella was a kind of blank slate character, with no real personality to actually speak of so that the reader could very easily insert themselves into her shoes. Well, having now read Twilight, I can definitely tell you that Bella Swan certainly has a personality, and not a lot of it is nice. Putting aside that she completely ignores her concerned mother's emails for 3 days right after moving in, after promising to email her every single day, she's constantly assuming the worst about everyone and seems to think that she's smarter and more introspective than everyone around her, despite being totally okay with dating someone who sneaks into her room at night to watch her sleep. I still can't get over that. She's constantly thinking really catty and unpleasant things about the group of friends that was practically gifted to her when she moved to Forks. She's always thinking that her male friends' acts of kindnesses are just shallow ways to get with her or get with one of her friends, likening them to dogs. Isn't that ironic? Which is really ironic, considering that she manipulates 15-year-old Jacob Black's feelings for her in order to get more information about the Cullens. Not a great look for 17-year-old Bella, I'm just saying. Speaking of Jacob, it should be noted that the implication that an entire real-life tribe of Native Americans are all werewolves is a bit problematic, to be generous. Luckily, it doesn't come to play much into this novel, but it does seem to become a bigger deal based on what I've seen of the whole Edward v. Jacob thing in the later books. And while the real-life Quileute tribe has benefited immensely financially from the attention that this series has shined on their tribe, the multimillionaire Stephenie Meyer, who used their likeness for her own book, has not done anything to help with that. Honestly, this entire plotline is in of itself not very helpful and she could have just done something else. However, I am by no means an expert on this topic, so instead of continuously bashing Miss Meyer for a topic I'm also ignorant about, I'm gonna use my platform to do something that'll actually help the Quileute tribe. In the description, there's a link to their charity called Move to Higher Ground. I hope you check it out and support it if you're able to. Now, enough with me getting preachy. Let's continue complaining about the vampire book. I just realized, why is she holding an apple on the cover? That doesn't make any sense. Like, I don't think they mention apples once in the story. The other character I want to talk about briefly is Charlie, Bella's police chief of a father. Charlie is a fascinating case because him and his relationship with Bella feel like they were written by someone who doesn't understand what a normal relationship between a parent and a child feels like. Charlie essentially functions as a piece of the scenery who's just there to eat some food that Bella cooks for him, go out fishing with Jacob's dad, and occasionally glare at Edward for a little bit. It's not like we're given a reason for this total apathy from him. It's just never addressed at all. There's actually one scene in the novel that almost perfectly encapsulates this whole problem. When the Cullens decide to hide Bella away to protect her from the vampire hunter who, may I remind you, just showed up in the last few chapters of the book, Bella, in all of her infinite wisdom, decides to just tell Charlie that she's going to leave Forks for Phoenix, and because she hates it there, and that it'll all be good. Not joking. That's her actual plan. And you know what the best part about it is? It works. Charlie just agrees to let her go to Phoenix by herself out of the blue at the ripe old age of 17. I'm 17. You know what would happen if I told my mom I was just going to be driving down to Arizona just because I felt like I didn't like it here? She'd laugh, that's what she'd do. But Charlie's just like, well, okay, I guess I'll see you later, my only daughter I've ever had. Familial responsibility, what's that? I hope I'll never see you again. Aren't I supposed to be the police chief? Maybe I should be more responsible than this. There are also just a few little small nitpicks that I noticed. I'm fairly sure that Stephenie Meyer's never actually been to Washington. For one thing, there's snowfall in the book, which is something that never happens here, except for maybe in February. For another, there are so many glaring holes in the knowledge of geography that start out kind of reasonable and then just descend into total insanity. She doesn't know that Tacoma is pretty close to Seattle. Okay, that's reasonable. That's something you wouldn't know if you weren't very familiar with the area. What's not is that saying that Forks doesn't have any kind of library, because apparently small towns just don't have anything, and that the only library is a 3-day drive away in Seattle. How big does she think Washington is? But that isn't really a big thing, which isn't why I made a big deal about it earlier. You really should research this stuff like this, write what you know and all that, but it's not gonna be something that's going to make or break your story. It's just something that I, as someone who lives in Washington, find really funny. But yeah, that's really all I wanted to say. Anything else that can be said about this book has probably already been said by way more people who are way more qualified than me. I just kind of wanted to talk about a few things that were fascinating to me specifically about this book. It's really interesting to look at it from an angle of someone who has never read it but has heard all about it for years, but I think I had a lot of fun doing it. But oh no, this story isn't over yet. There's one final chapter. It should be noted that I was not the only one involved in this whole Twilight extravaganza. In fact, it wasn't even my idea. It was actually my mom's. She wanted me and my brother to fully have a Twilight experience just so we could truly appreciate how fun it is to make fun of it. As she pointed out though, only to a certain extent. After a certain point it just becomes mean, which I hope I haven't crossed in this video. Anyways, to this end, my mom figured that the whole Twilight experience wouldn't be complete without a trip to Forks, Washington. It was a fun time, honestly. It's not a big town in any way, and they are very, very aware of the publicity that they got from Twilight. There was Twilight stuff everywhere, as you're probably seeing on the screen right now, and this was really impressive considering that the entire town was probably like 5 square acres. Also, here's footage to prove that Forks does in fact have a library. The town was also fun other than just the Twilight stuff. We stayed in an Airbnb that was right next to a graveyard, and walked around a little bit, going on the Twilight tour that the Airbnb provided us with. We saw Bella's house, and a house that no matter what the guide said was definitely not the Cullens' house. And generally just had a good time. It was a fun weekend out, and it helped me appreciate that while I may not find the whole Twilight franchise to my personal taste, the amount of industry that it created for this small town was noticeable and remarkable. An industry that I showed my support for by buying this magnifying glass. I don't know why, I just thought it'd be fun to have a souvenir, I guess. Whoa, oh, oh, uh-oh, whoa, whoa, I guess I just thought it'd be semi-useful. I suppose the great irony in all of this is that while I did not enjoy reading the book, and I did not find either the movie or the book good in any way, I still enjoyed myself. I found a new movie that I can watch in the background if I really need some time to myself to think, or if I just needed time to turn off my brain and just watch a movie. I also had a nice weekend trip with my family, and in the middle of all this craziness that's going on, that was really refreshing. And through it all, I now have an appreciation for someone who does really like this series. Again, this franchise isn't really for me, but I can see how it can bring joy to people, and I can see how it's helped so many people in different ways. And while I may have my problems with it, it's not this horrifying thing that needs to be buried alive. That honor belongs to 50 Shades of Grey. And, I guess that's going to be the end of today's video. Whew, boy, that video took a long time to make. I've been working on this video since January, so I don't know when this is going to come out, but it's been a while, for sure, definitely. I really hope you enjoyed this video. I sincerely hope I made your day just that little bit better. Feel free to check out my socials here, or they're linked down in the description. Also down in the description is my Discord server, which I really hope more people join, so if you would be interested in joining, I would really love for that to happen. So there's a link for that as well, along with the socials. Leave a comment down below if you want me to make a video on something else in the future, or if you just want to say hi. I read all the comments that I can, so I'll almost certainly get to yours. Don't forget to like, share, and/or subscribe with notifications on so you get notified for every single one of my videos. Only about 40% of the people who are watching this video are actually subscribed to the channel, so if you did subscribe, it would really help the channel out a lot and just help it continue to grow, and honestly, it would really just mean a lot to me. And I guess I'll see you in the next video. Bye! Ella and Bedward